So today I'm delighted to welcome Alana Penkethman to the podcast. Alana is an associate at Laces Solicitors and is an employment lawyer that makes employment work for you, your business and your family. Welcome, Alana. Lovely to have you on here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So I love your strapline. So in all the time I've met you, whilst you're a passionate advocate about flexible working and employment law, you're very human with it.
Thank you.
So does that describe you well enough? Is that?
Yeah, I think it's that element of, we've all got to work, and we all want our businesses to be a success, but it's just trying to find that sort of best way of making sure that everybody is working to their best potential and that they're in the best environment and that everyone is basically set up to succeed for businesses and individuals.
So you are passionate about not only working with experts, but actually evolving the world of work. So keeping an open mind, make sure, like you said, everyone comes to work, has a good place to work and is able to really thrive and be their best self at work. So tell us a little bit more about what that actually means for you.
Well, I think there are so many really valuable experts out there who all play a different part in the world of work. And it's very easy to sort of think, okay, I'm an employment lawyer. All I need to do is look at the law that's out there. And we've got reams of legislation. And actually, I think it's a discipline. Actually, the legislation is quite clear and quite helpful. But we need to obviously expand that to the practical application of it. And it's not really sufficient to just take the law and apply it to a set of facts that are going in the workplace. When you work with HR advisors, you can see they're on the front line and they're the ones that are implementing those procedures which have to be compliant with the law. So, we can work with them to sort of find out how are they applying that and how is it being received. They're the ones that are speaking with senior management. They're the ones that are speaking with employees and seeing what the impact of this is. And it's not enough for me in my role to just look at, okay, what are the legal implications and what does the law say about that? It's the practical application of making it work in the workplace. And then, you've got the coaching element of, do those employees have the skill set? You and I have spoken many times that as a lawyer, I know the law well and I know the case law and the legislation, and that's great. But there's much more to my role than that. And so that's the same in every profession, that where, coaching is necessary to make sure that employee, again, can fulfill their potential and look at how they are using their skills in the workplace. And then equally, you've got mediators, recruitment experts, all sort of part of this big puzzle where everybody is doing their part to make the world of work for everybody, and actually having those conversations and truly working collaboratively is brilliant. And I'm a big fan of actually just having those conversations to open it up and look at, okay, well, what are you doing and what are you seeing and how can I help with that? And because I think it is more than just turning up, doing your skills, getting the job done and going home. If we want to sort of have a really productive world of work, which is sustainable, because we've got a really turbulent landscape at the moment, then we need to open it up a bit more, don't we? And I think the only way to do that is to have those meaningful conversations so that we can all work together, I think.
And that begs the question then, because we know that it's been particularly disruptive over the last few years, but none of that's going to change. We're seeing lots of legislation coming down the line, Brexit, COVID, everything like that it's still affecting the workplace. So from your lens, what does the current workforce look like right now? What does the workplace look like?
It's a real jumble. And it's trying to maintain some consistency, because as individuals, as humans, we crave consistency and familiarity, and we like the things that we know, even if they might not be the best option. They're familiar, and that's comforting to us. So it's trying to balance those with the recognition that actually those things might not be appropriate anymore because we've moved forward. And as you say, the legislation is changing, and I'm sure it's been an absolute nightmare trying to wrap up all of the EU law at the end of the year and trying to bring that in internally and trying to adopt that so that we can still operate and apply that legislation. And I think the legislation is keeping up, but things are moving very, very quickly. And we've had so many factors that have escalated things. As you say, the pandemic obviously threw up the world of work, and sort of we've settled with a very different attitude and mindset, I think, employers and employees. And it's shifted those expectations. So you've got, if I say the sort of current, or I suppose the current workforce being those that were in the workplace before the pandemic, and they have a very traditional way of working, or rather they've experienced a very traditional way of working. When that comes to things like management, we know how the hierarchy works, we know how people progress, and we know how that is applied and how people sort of conform to that. But then we've got a new workforce, which is the sort of the post-pandemic attitude of, actually, perhaps I want more from work, and flexibility is a part of that we've obviously all experienced. Perhaps an element of working from home or shifting our working hours. So we've seen that actually maybe it doesn't need to be Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, but actually I think it's a lot more than that, more than flexibility. It's looking at, have I got value in my role? Does my work have purpose? Am I, what am I doing with my work, basically? And although the pandemic was, just, an incidental part of that, it's just shifted attitudes a bit because everybody stepped back and sort of had time to look at and assess what they're doing. So that's the sort of new workforce, but we've also got a young workforce, and that young workforce are coming into the workplace with entirely different perspectives. They have generally they have a wider perspective as to sort of tolerance and inclusivity, and just sort of basically they're very much more open-minded to how they approach everything, but also they haven't experienced that traditional workplace because they're coming into it now where we have got those new formats and new ways of working. So it's trying to sort of find a way to merge the traditional attitudes and mindset with the new workforce and the young workforce, and trying to find a way to say, well, how do we take this forward? Because obviously one option, which a lot of firms are adopting, is just to revert to the status quo and just go back to where we were, because let's face it, it's worked or it's been in existence for decades and it's got the job done. So we could do that, and we could stick with what we know. But it is an opportunity to go, well, is this the best way of working? And I think when we look at productivity, for example, people get hung up on, when we talk about, say, flexible working, for example, productivity being a result of, am I working in the best environment? So am I working at the optimum time for me? And am I working in the best space? Have I got the tools that I need? Have I got the sort of environment that I need to be able to do my work well? And that is part of productivity, and that comes with flexibility. But the bigger impact is that if you can, as an employer, if you can provide employees with some sense of control over how they're working, whilst those particular factors will contribute to productivity, the main value that you're getting in that, and the main trigger for productivity, is that sense of purpose. Because if you're giving your employees control over how they work, you're showing that you trust them, that you value what they do, and that you and that they are part of this. They are valued as part of the business. And that's where the productivity comes in, because you've got engagement. And so all of those things.
Let's just talk about, because you mentioned the word control there. So
Yeah.
what kind of control is
Well,
that?
control is always a really interesting point in employment law, because we have, I mean, if we go back to worker status, one of the main tests for worker status is control, and how much control the employer has over the employee. And one of the leading cases is about the fact that a manager still has control over an airline pilot. Even though that manager has no idea how to fly the plane, they are still in control of that pilot. And so it's that element of sort of saying, well, you know, I'm responsible for you, what you choose, what you do, and the risks that you take. And as a manager, I'm responsible for your output, and I'm responsible for any mistakes you make. I'm responsible for any successes you have. But ultimately, I'm handing you the reins to achieve it in the way that you see best. And if you think that you can do that best at home, where you're free from distractions and you're able to, and you're comfortable, and obviously we've got a whole other element of protected characteristics and discrimination points that we could pick up about certain protected characteristics that do work better from home for various reasons, whether that's a disability or a caring responsibility or whatever, and whether what time of day you work best. If we give you that autonomy to choose that, then we're showing that, you know, we respect you as an individual to make these decisions that will give you the best productivity. So it's that control point of saying, I do have ultimate responsibility for you, but I'm giving you enough control to make the right choices. And I often, I don't know if I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent here, but I often think it's very similar to the sort of parent-child relationship, in that in my opinion, a good parent is a parent that gives a child the opportunity to learn for themselves and to make the right decisions. And I think that's the same with employees, that actually a good employer should be able to trust their employees to do the right thing and to get the best out of their work. So it is that sort of element of the shift in control, isn't it, as to how much you can give to your employees to get engagement.
And maybe there's an opportunity to really flip that control. I think it's an interesting word, and I get the word, and
might be a poor choice of word.
But it sounds to me it's around having that accountability, and you know, that I think you've given that if you have the bedrock, the stability, that environment where it's trusted and it's open, and then the individuals in that take some accountability, and make the decisions, the right choices, then that leads to a much better output and happiness, and where people can actually thrive in that workplace.
That's it. And I think it's very easy to get distracted by the fluffy idea of employees. When we talk about work-life balance, that actually a lot of people will say that, you know, work-life balance comes from almost merging the two. And I'm not sure I do agree with that. For me personally, I do have to keep the two very separate. But I think that when we look at control and how those individuals are working, again, going back to tradition, we've had employees, we've had workers, we've had self-employed. And traditionally, if you wanted that complete freedom to work as you wished in the way that you felt fit, you'd go self-employed. That was the sort of easy route. And that sort of is the sort of, to a lot of people, that is the dream, and they can completely fit it around their work. But I think we're now at a much, because of the flexibility that I suppose the pandemic has brought, those lines have been blurred somewhat. And so even when you have traditional employees working in under a traditional contract, they are now being given a bit more trust and a bit more flexibility. And so they are behaving like consultants. And the good thing about consultants or self-employed is a successful consultant will do well because they care about their work and because they are willing to put in the time and the effort to make that work productive and successful. And so by offering employees similar working practices to a consultant, you are giving them the same sense of purpose and value, and encouraging them to want to get the best out of their work. They're doing that work because it means something to them, not because it pays their bills. And so it's a shift in that as well. And I think that, as I say, it's not a case of it's really hard because sometimes you do talk to people and you get the impression that we are only entertaining the idea of flexible working as a nice thing to do. And it is a really nice thing to do. It's a really important thing to do. And it is the right thing to do for a lot of people. Tick box. And the legislation that's now there and, well, has been changed. It's always been there, but it's been sort of shifted somewhat. It is the right thing to do and it is a nice thing to do. But it can genuinely be a really productive thing to sort of, as an employer, to say to your employees, you're valuable to me. And, I want you to have meaning in your work and I want you to go and do it well. And I think that's actually really important as a sort of foundation. And so I think when we talk about the future of work, I wonder if that sort of those three categories of worker, employee, worker, and self-employed, I think that is going to be diluted, and that the future workforce will be much more grey. So for HR, it's going to be even more of a nightmare to sort of try and work out, well, where do we get those employment rights? But fundamentally, from a legislation point of view, it might be a bit of a nightmare, but it will come down to, are both parties behaving in a fair and reasonable manner? And at the end of the day, that's primarily the main test for most employment disputes anyway. So I think it's a sort of shift in attitude, isn't it? But the same fundamental aspects remain the same.
Well, it's redefining. So whilst you've talked about the traditional things that are underlying there, it's actually redefining that. One of the points I wanted to pick up on, you mentioned around young people coming to work don't have experience in that, and actually they do. I remember just after COVID, I think it was third lockdown, I went and did a careers event, and I spoke to a 15-year-old. And she said that she did not want to be in a position as her family had been so affected by COVID. So the impression that whatever situation those families have been in, those children have seen it, and it's those children are then defining what it is that they want next. They don't want to be beholden to an employer and only do that because they were so deeply affected by what had happened. And I thought it was a really interesting point because we so often forget that, you have education, you might have extended education, and then they go into work. And actually throughout that whole period is that re-education and bridging that gap between education and work. So making sure that actually children are really savvy, even more so these days. They see everything.
They do.
And they experience everything. They get talked about, they're encouraged to talk about their emotions at quite a young age at school now. So they're much more open and very, very happy to just say things as it is and share what's going on for them. And in some ways that's brilliant, but in other ways, that's what people are finding quite difficult.
Yeah.
So when you talked earlier about, they do want a purposeful career, they want to do something very intentional that matters, but they also want to earn well, they want to have a good, stable life, they want to have growth, they want to learn. And actually, as you were talking about that consultative mode, that's pretty much what they want. They want to be in that startup, scale up, exciting, impactful, purposeful. And actually, even if you're a global organization, you could still offer those opportunities by, saying, this is what we're going for. What do you think? And you get hooked on that, and people will give their all for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and then they want to move on to the next. They will not want to become stale. And that movement, I think, is probably the biggest shift to the workforce that people will see. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely bang on as usual. Yeah, you're right. Children do see everything. And okay, they might not have worked in that working environment, but you're right. They've seen the impact of it. And the opinion piece is really important because, as you say, that has caused a lot of friction. You know, I say we as a sort of existing workforce, I suppose, have always been used to pretty much coming to work. And I think you and I both have said that we don't really like the concept of bringing your whole self to work, but it's very much been a case that you come to work with your professional hat on and you do your job and that's it. And any personal opinions you would probably either keep to yourself or you would perhaps just share with those that you do have a very sort of trusting relationship with. But that's not the case with the younger workforce, and I think that's a good thing. You know, it's good that people are being challenged, and you know, we could do a whole separate podcast on freedom of speech and the impact of that in the workplace. Yeah. And goodness me, we've seen so much case law over the past 6 months as the impact of those statements being made and how they've been received in the workplace, particularly by that not necessarily older generation, but again traditional generation and the disputes it's caused. But generally, I think it's important that we do have the freedom to express our opinions in the workplace as well as elsewhere. But that comes back to this factor of needing respect and sort of, again, value and trust and just this sort of safe workplace, which again all sounds a bit fluffy, but you can only say those if you're going to make strong opinions and express strong opinions, then that comes with being able to hear other people's points of view, and you have to have both of those things. And actually, you know, that's a much bigger conversation and a much bigger piece on how we actually tackle that, because obviously that's a massive cause of friction worldwide as to how people's opinions are received. But yeah, going back to the younger workforce, I think it's important they do express that. And the good thing about that is I think that because, as you say, in schools, they're encouraged to have that conversation, but they're encouraged to have those conversations in a space with their peers and other students, and to see the impact of those conversations and see how it affects other people, so that then when they are going into the workplace, it will be the same environment and they will have a better understanding of how sharing those opinions impacts others. Because they do talk about things, and most of the problems that we see in employment law at the moment are because things aren't talked about. They're not talked about until it's too late. You know, we don't have those conversations as soon as there's a problem. It's all very much a case of we stick to the status quo, something will blow up, and then we tackle it. Well, the younger workforce don't tackle things that way. They confront it head on. And I think that's a good thing and a good change. And it's something that certainly the, let's say, current workforce can learn from. But it takes us out of our comfort zone. And I think that is hard.
Well, it's new.
It's new, yeah.
It's new and it's different. But when you've experienced that, I think this is around being able to facilitate those healthy debates. I think that's what we're talking about. If you can facilitate, and that's a new skill, if you can facilitate those conversations, and it's not about aggression, you know, you talked about respect, it's about having those healthy, respectful debates where your views matter. Let's, you know, facilitate it well and cleanly, then that will become much more iterative. And I think what people are often frightened of is starting that, because what they do is come from a no or a shared opinion rather than being able to facilitate.
Yeah.
And obviously, if it's contentious, that's slightly different. But what we're talking about is general healthy debates all the time, because then you get more productivity, you get more output, and actually where that connection, where you talked about work and life, actually the connection is, if you love what you do and you bring that love into work, not in an icky way, but that passion, that purpose, that's the connection with your life.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And I think historically it's, I'm going to work, put on, you know, get your bag, put on your coat, your suit, you go out, and then you decompress for 30 minutes on your drive home or an hour, and then you come back in and you switch over. And that's quite hard because we're talking about switching quite a lot, and
Yeah.
but that's really hard. Whereas if you love it, you'll bring that excitement and okay, challenge too. Challenge is important, but then you create that environment for yourself and for your colleagues too.
Yeah. I think there's
Um,
two aspects of that, isn't there? That I think there's a conversation to be had about management, which you and I have spoken about before, and we probably will
yeah,
naturally come on to soon enough. Um, but I think the other point is actually that value can be found in any job. And I think it can be quite
mm,
easy for employees to think, well, it's all well and good for you to find passion in, whether you're changing the law, whether you're applying the law. But, you know, if it's a job that is on the face of it, just a job, you might not instantly feel that that approach applies. But I think it does, because I think even, the most basic jobs that are out there, they do all have value. And again, the pandemic was a prime example of going, because I mean, that's another massive conversation about how we rank value in work. And, some of the lower paid work is actually the most valuable work. And that's a massive problem and a conversation piece again. But I think whatever work you do, it does have value. That's why that role is there. If that role wasn't needed, it wouldn't be there. No one's paying you
yeah,
to do a job that isn't
yeah,
needed. And as soon as you can find and recognize and accept the value in your role and what you are bringing to that company that day, it changes your attitude. And that, the ripples, we see it all the time in customer service, that the ripple of good customer service on customers and how they view the company, and then how they choose to continue to buy from that company. Yeah, they are teeny tiny ripples, but they have a massive impact. And that comes down to, again, as to why are you going to work? Are you going to work to pay the bills, which for most of us, that is your starting point. But why are you doing that job? And what can you
mm,
achieve in that job? And whether that's making someone's life, someone's day a bit easier, or whether it's dealing with a massive issue that's going to change the outcome of someone's, I don't know, career or income, or whatever. They all have value. And I think it's looking at your role and seeing what you can achieve in it. And that comes down to good management, and the management being there to coach employees to pick that up. And that's that management point that we've had before about how typically managers will be promoted into a managerial role because they are good at their day job. And sometimes that's enough, and sometimes you need a bit more to it. And we've said that actually good managers are the ones that know how to coach employees, know how to mentor employees, and know how to get the employees to the point where they are finding value in their work, because then they contribute more to the business. And it's all sort of the same cog, isn't it? It's all part of the same sort of message or story, that you need to work collaboratively, and you need to bring in those skills, those soft skills, as well as technical skills, to fill the picture, I think.
mm. I call them the essential skills. They're vital for
Yeah.
where we're
Mm-hmm.
going. Vital, flatter organizations, valuable work, meaningful work at all points of the stage. I mean, we saw it when the farmers were struggling to find pickers, because
Yeah.
and drivers, supermarkets are finding drivers, HGV drivers, food delivery drivers, all of that, and then massive recruitment spike that people were going on during the pandemic. Then we actually appreciated, all the little things, the bin lorries, the
Yeah.
how often your refuse is being collected. That all slowed down and stopped, and it was a massive problem. And
Mm.
actually, we appreciating that value chain of the cycle of living
Yeah.
is quite key, is really key. Whether you're a manager, a cleaner, a fruit picker, a waiter, whichever part you play, it's valuable in that part of life. And I think we so easily forget that.
I was just gonna ask you that. But do you think we have learned from that, or do you think we have forgotten it already?
I think it's a mix.
Yeah.
I think there is, because that tradition was for such a long time, it feels like that is the way we should go back to.
Yeah.
But if it was so good, why are people asking for different right now?
Yeah. I think
And
that's really, really
actually,
important.
during that time, did it really not work? Or was it just people felt uncomfortable?
Mm.
And that it's that uncomfortableness you want to explore rather than put in another policy or another rule. And actually, and also from an individual perspective, complete remote working didn't work for everybody,
Yeah.
because people like that socialization, that community. So I think the next few years are going to be quite interesting as people start to move. We're still going to have multiple generations in that workplace. It's still going to be challenged, and it's going to be ripe for opportunity to really carve out what those next 5 years look like, and guaranteed it will evolve even more.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's the point, is that we need to make sure that we do still have those conversations and keep progressing and assessing and looking at what we've done, because it would be very easy to hop back. And it will always be the more attractive options to, again, as we started with, to stick to what you know. But we did have such a good opportunity during the pandemic to pause and to look at, is this the best way to handle this, or can we take things forward in a different way? And I think, unfortunately, well, not necessarily unfortunately, I think there will always be a space and a need for the traditional way of working. I think there will always, we've seen everybody is up in arms about the magic circle firms that have called everyone, for example, back to the office, and they are offering pay rises for the people who are reverting, and they're giving pay cuts or dismissals to those who won't return to the former way of working. And as a lawyer, we could run a perfectly strong claim for indirect discrimination and all of those points, and you could argue it's unlawful. But ultimately, those businesses will continue to work like that because some employees do want to work like that, and that's okay. It has to be a choice thing, doesn't it? That some people do want to work either Monday to Friday 9 to 5, or even really excessive hours. It's if that's that person's idea of success and what they want to be doing with their work, and that's meaningful to them, then that should still be available. But equally, I think there's going to be a lot of employers who are offering a different way of work and saying, well, if this works for you, this is what we want to do. And so I think you will end up with a much more truly diverse way of working. And when we think of diversity, normally it's about, I don't know, well, yeah, those different factors. But I think it will just be a real mixed bag of, there will still be a requirement for that traditional way of working. And part of the problem is, as consumers, what do clients want? And, I love the idea of working flexibly. But equally, I want my doctor's appointment to be available on my terms, and I want my Amazon delivery to be delivered. And so it's all that sort of thing of, what do I want, but what do I expect from other people? And so there will always be a need for all different types of working. But it's just a case of keeping that conversation moving to saying, as a business, what is the best thing for us? How do we get the most engagement out of our employees to deliver the best service to our clients, customers, consumers, and just keep moving forward? And I think the new workforce will have a massive part to play in that, and we need to listen to what they're saying. And I think that's really important.
I think it's a brilliant note that you've left us on, Alana. And before I go into, well, AI and technology will help ease all of that, and that's a
Yeah,
whole new landscape and a whole new conversation around that. So, whilst you beautifully finished on that, is that where you think the future is? This blend is my words now, this blended workforce, this truly diverse offering for people.
I hope so. I think there are so many we are all completely different, and we all have different needs, whether that's a protected need, or a want can still be a need, can't it? I need my Wednesdays for mental health to go out on my bike ride, but I probably don't need it to work flexibly for my parental responsibilities anymore. But we all are different. We all have different needs. We all have different versions of success. We all have different priorities. And that's the same for businesses. And I think that businesses need to look at their individual workforces and say, do my employees feel valued, or do my workers feel valued? Are they doing this because it pays their bills, or are they doing this because it's something that is contributing to the success of the business in the future and contributing to the future world of work, I suppose? Because at the end of the day, our work is fundamental to the wider success, isn't it? All the roles that we do are vital for humanity. Sounds a bit dramatic, but but it is. It's
Well,
the
it
case
is.
of, how we take this forward. Because I think that humanity point is really important as well, and it's that compassion point, and actually remembering that we are all just trying to get through, aren't we? And if you can make that easier for somebody, if you can make that easier for an individual, if you can make it better for a business, all of those have got to be good things.
Superb. Thank you so much, Alana. Lovely
Thank
conversation today. I will put your contact details in all the comments below, and I'm sure people will be in touch or follow you, because actually you post quite a lot on LinkedIn. So follow you, go to one of your events, and just connect.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. I've really enjoyed this morning. It's been really helpful.
Thanks very much.